Yo, what's thinking, everybody? So today, I have to make a little confession. I haven't been listening a lot to what my peers have been doing over the last couple of years, and that is because around 2019, up until 2019, I was going through a lot of stuff, and I was trying to finish up my Relic of the Mothership album. So I was really trying to like stay in the zone with that. And then when I finally, got that done, I was a little bit deflated, and at the same time was trying to put together a tour myself, a world tour myself. Then the pandemic happened, and everything went to crap, yada yada yada. And so recently, I redid my room, got a better setup, better acoustic setup, and things like that. And maybe about a week ago or so, I decided, hey, let me get it together and take a listen to what a lot of the other modern funksters are doing. It's partially the competitive aspect in me to see where I'm at. Am I obsolete? But also from a more macro view perspective, or just thinking like, how are we doing? How's everything going? Is it progressing? And I kind of went through, I would say I maybe went through about 3 years of different catalogs, from a wealth of artists, a lot of different artists, and just would skim through stuff. And I noticed a pattern. I noticed a very consistent common denominator amongst the vast majority of what I was hearing, with the exception of a few that I could literally count on my hand. The main pattern that I was noticing was usually mediocre to poor mixing work. And it's a little disappointing because if it's supposed to be modern funk, my thinking at least is that it should involve some form of modern mixing and recording techniques. But a lot of stuff that I was hearing, I would hear a lot of good songs and arrangements and compositions, but the end result, the whole song is like this. It's like listening to it through a keyhole or something like that. Or maybe they'll have like one or two vocals out to the side, or maybe a synth or something filling out a little bit of the stereo image, but the whole song in mono?
Stop it.
Hey, that's not even old school funk. Hey, this is 1940s, 1950s style mixing here. So there were things like that, and just a whole bunch of other things that I just was not hearing. In my view, I believe that if we don't see a vast improvement in this particular aspect, this could very well be the death of the funk, because it can't just be a couple of people, Snoop Dogg, Battle Cat, Chromeo, Bruno Mars, and Tuxedo. It can't be just a handful of people that is coming up with really solid work, crossover potential work. If you want your material to have that possible crossover appeal, it's in the mix. So you have to make a bigger effort to try and get your material to compete with commercial standards. This is that crossover point. It's in the mix. So I want to try and address this from two different angles. One that is, of course, geared to the DIY folks. If you're determined to do this yourself, I want to do some more material about basics, just mixing basics. And then also, I want to use this opportunity to plug myself and my good friend Ivan Macville with our new premature launch of our mixing and mastering service called Stankface Mastering. All right, we're playing with some names, but the idea is that we want to bring a service to the modern funk community at an affordable price and actually give your material a fighting chance at crossing over. Get more radio play, get more Spotify playlists, submissions, things like that. Just more crossover appeal. To start off with, I'm going to do a little series just kind of talking in theory, and maybe, some examples on the computer or something like that, but mostly talking, and I'm going to do a lot of linking in these videos. I'm going to try and keep it short. So I wrote a couple of things down, and we just look up these principles and start implementing this in your mixes. It's going to be a major, major improvement. So I wrote this down because I wanted to list down a lot of things that I wasn't hearing. So let's go through it. First thing, avoid digital clipping, digital distortion at all cost, like the plague. Whatever you have to do to make sure you get clean tracks coming in, do it. When you're mixing, this whole notion of going into the red or something like that, it looks cool, you see it on video, get rid of that notion. Make sure your material is not digitally clipping. There's a good type of distortion and there's a bad type of distortion. This is the bad type of distortion I'm talking about. The good type of distortion is the saturation. It's going through iron, right? So tape saturation of preamps or things like that, right? That's that kind of distortion. Of course, guitar distortion, right? That kind of stuff. That's the good distortion. Stay away from the bad distortion. How do we do that? You want to come in, if you're recording, you don't want to come in too much more than about minus 6 dB. Hover around minus 12 dB, you're always safe. Next thing, gain staging. This also has to do with your digital distortion, clipping, things like that. Don't go into the red. It's not a thing in the digital world. However, when it comes to using analog modeled plugins, this is really, really, really important. So when it comes to gain staging and using analog modeled plugins, you got to read the manuals on this software because they're all modeled pretty much directly after the software itself. All of these tools have sweet spots, so to speak. So you want to make sure that you're not coming in too hot, or you just won't have control over it. It's going to sound nasty, the nasty distortion, or you want to make sure it's not coming in too soft, or it's just not really making much of a difference anyway, right? You're not using it at all. It's just kind of going through it and very lightly, right? So gain station, very, very, very important, especially when you're working with these analog modeled plugins. Next one, vocal production. Okay, I'm going to do videos on all of this stuff. I'm just going to list some of the things I'm just not hearing. So I'm not hearing a lot of structure being implemented in the vocal recording process. I can hear it. I'll give you a couple tips on how to deal with this. Take it in parts. Do dubs. Do it twice. Do it 3 times, 4 times, right? And then you can use that to either map out sort of a ultimate master take, or you can use all of those takes to make a really fat, weighty, something with gravitas. You can do that. Make sure you tune your vocals. I'm not hearing a lot of that. Tune your vocals. It's 2021. If you're not an insanely skilled singer, I'm not, tune your vocals, right? Take the time, and not auto-tune, manual tuning. This software has gotten a lot cheaper now, and it's a lot better now. Not Melodyne. You can use Logic and stuff in Cubase. There's all kinds of great solutions for this issue. Take the time to tune your vocals. If you're having a problem hearing these, very subtle pitching differences and timing differences, for the pitching, definitely start with some ear training. Learn your basic scales and intervals. You can graduate to harmonies. You can get more and more complex with your harmonies. Next up, dynamic tools, really, really important, okay? And of course, EQ as well. But dynamic tools, I'm really seeing both an overuse and an underuse of these tools. So I'm talking about compression, gates, expanders, de-essers, limiters, multiband compressors, things like that. Make sure you don't overuse it. Also, if you're using analog modeled software plugins, make sure you have a bit of an understanding how these different compression types work, how these different technologies work. So you have FET compressors, that's field effect transistor compressors. You have VCA compressors, that's voltage controlled amplifier compressors. That's SSL, for example. You have opto compressors. You have Varimu compressors. There's a few of them out there, right? And then, of course, your limiters, multiband compressors, right? Understand the difference between some of these tools and learn how to learn the best practices of when and where to use them. Make sure you don't overuse them. I used to do that a lot. Another one I don't hear a lot, crosstalk between reverbs and delays. This is a really, really, really important one. You can't just slap delays and reverbs on top of each other and think it's going to create the depth that you're looking for. It has to talk with each other a little bit. Okay, so you have to do things like feed your short reverbs into your longer reverbs, feed your delays into your long reverbs, have more than one type of delay, things like that. So make sure that you're paying attention to that crosstalk between your delays. Make sure it's not rumbling and muddying up your mixes as well. Very, very important. Put a little low cut, a little high cut on your reverbs and delays, especially on the delays too. You can be really, really extreme with that as well and come up with some really cool textures. Big one. Panning and automation. I don't hear this at all. And again, we're going back to this keyhole mixes and the mono mixes. Pan your stuff out, make it take up more space in the stereo image, and use automation. That's why it's there, and that's what all the old school mixing engineers back in the days did, automating, right? Except for at that time, they did it in real time, and the way that they remembered all of these moves, EQ moves, turning the EQ on, turning it off, maybe, coming up with a little bit treble at a certain time, or maybe it's, messing with levels, maybe playing with the effects, playing with the panning, all of that. They would either memorize it or write it all down, right? You don't have to do that. You can automate it yourself, right? And this is the big one. Because if you do this is really the thing that really brings the energy to your song. This is what creates the overall dynamic. So I'll give you a tip on that one. Once you've figured out the balance that you want, you can kind of set that balance to your chorus. So take the most energetic part of your song, set your balance, and then when you're looking at the other parts of the arrangement, so your chorus and your verses or a breakdown or something like that, automate there. So everything on the chorus is cool. Don't touch it. Go to your verses and other parts, and then bring things down. Automate things down if it's too loud, or up if it makes sense. So the overall idea is automate everything that makes sense to automate. Okay. So those are the main things I'm not hearing in the mixes. The next thing I want to talk about is something that I've spoken at length with Ivan. He's a mastering engineer. And so we'll talk a lot about our experiences either dealing with clients or dealing with projects and things like that. And one big pattern that I'm seeing a lot is that a lot of folks are coming to him or other mastering engineers and expecting them to save their mix or fix their mix. This is not how we want to make use of our mastering engineers. You're asking too much of them. If you have issues with your mix, you have to address it in the mix. Don't expect the mastering engineer to do that for you. If the mastering engineer is fixing anything, they're fixing a very, very small, tiny resonance issue as a result of maybe some sort of processing that they did. Maybe they did a big boost on the low end, and so now resonance is coming up a little bit, so they'll notch that out with a dB or two, something like that. But very, very subtle moves here. Other than that, don't expect them to save your mix. So if your whole mix is like mono and it's like very muffled and stuff like that, mastering engineer can't really do a whole lot for you in this regard. You have to really, really, really work on your mix here. The mastering engineer is more concerned about making sure that your material translates on as many different formats as you plan to have them, so that all of the loudness and perceived loudness is pretty much uniform wherever you listen to it. So they're paying attention to something totally different than we are when we're mixing. They're looking at true peak dB levels. They're looking at LUFS, LUFS is a more recent type of measurement of perceived loudness, and a bunch of other things. And they're always constantly paying attention to this because this changes constantly. So, for example, did you know the loudness wars were over? No? If you didn't know that, then you really maybe shouldn't pay attention too much to mastering. Make sure that you're getting the sound that you want in your mix, and expect the mastering engineer not to do too much except for making it the correct loudness. Again, also, mastering again is not necessarily just about loudness. That's part of it. But understand that what you want out of your mastering engineer is not a brand new song or a brand new result. It shouldn't necessarily change all that much. Okay. There is a chance that you may struggle to actually be able to hear these type of fine details, these 1 and 2 dB moves and the differences between different compression types and stuff like that. Trust me, I get it. I'm going to tell you right now what your biggest obstacle probably is that's Acoustics. If you're working in a very, very, very small place, if you have a setup, a rig, and you shoved it into a corner of your room, if all you have is headphones, right, then you're going to have a lot of obstacles working against you. And so you might need to, maybe reach out to some people for some perspective. If you have the budget, do what you can to treat your room properly and meaningfully. If you can as well, if you have a connection or two to somebody with a really, really good studio setup, try and go over there and take a couple of listens to some songs, your song, other songs, and get that frame of reference. This is going to be a very, very, very powerful thing for you because you want to be able to work in a way that you are experiencing the same thing that you want your end consumers to experience. So if you want somebody to experience a 3D like kind of mix or something like that, you got to have a 3D kind of studio. You got to have a 3D sound in your working environment. So that's about it for this video. I'm going to do some more videos and more in depth of all of these subjects. But if you just look this up yourself, do your homework yourself, by the time I come up with these videos, you would have said, oh, what are you doing? You're wasting my time. I already know this. Okay, so digital clipping, good distortion, bad distortion, gain staging, and how that applies to old school emulations of old school equipment. Vocal production, so that's structuring your sessions, more dubs, tuning your vocals, tuning the timing, learning your basic scales and harmonies if you have a problem with hearing. Dynamic tools, so that's your compressing, your gates, your expanders, DSs, compression types, FET, Varimus, VCAs, octos, multiband limiters, yada yada. Crosstalk between your reverbs and delays and other ambient type of material to create depth. Panning and automation, so important, right? This creates the overall dynamic and the life in the music. Making sure that you are establishing the sound that you want in your mix and not expecting your mastering engineer to do that for you. Very important. And lastly, if you're having a problem hearing all this stuff, treat your room, try to find a space that's already well treated. Get that frame of reference. Try and get this experience under your belt. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. Stay tuned for some more on this little series. And until then, I will see you in the next video. Peace.